أما بعد يقول الله في كتابه الكريم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم يا أيها النبي قل لأزواجك وبناتك ونساء المؤمنين يدنين عليهن من جلابيبهن ذلك أدنى أن يعرفن فلا يؤذين. The discussion concerning the niqab is one of the most controversial discussions in the religion of Islam, and a discussion which requires an in-depth examination. For the discussion of the niqab is a discussion that can be seen in both Eastern and Western circles, and is an area which many Muslims are questioned about in relation to the veil which covers the face. Hence, the lady who wears the veil which covers the face is known as a niqabiyya, both used in the noun and the adjective. And indeed, you find that in the Western world there are many misconceptions when examining the subject of the niqab, and the idea that there are many who misunderstand what is the exact relevance of the covering of the face with the veil. Many who do not know whether it is obligatory or whether it is recommended, whether it is religious or whether it is cultural. And even within the Muslim world, there are many who seem uncertain as to the origin of the niqab, as to whether the origin of the niqab is something entrenched within the world of the Quran and Hadith, or is it something which is merely seen as being cultural. And that's why you find when you look at the world media, and especially within world politics, there are many who have offered different opinions about the niqab. As an example, you find Nicolas Sarkozy of France came forward and said that the niqab is a sign of the enslavement and the subservience of women within the religion of Islam. In the idea that he saw the niqab as being a sign of oppression, that many Muslim women were being oppressed, having to wear a niqab which covers their face. Likewise, you find that the state of Florida was taken to court by Sultana Freeman, who wanted to wear the niqab as a Muslim revert. She wanted that niqab to be part of her picture, even though the picture was part of a driving license. And she took the state to court, highlighting the idea that she wanted to wear the niqab and felt that it was her right. Likewise, you find that Jack Straw, the Home Secretary, at one point in British politics, also spoke about the niqab in relation to a girl by the name of Aisha Azmi, who was a teacher in a school in the UK, who wanted to wear the niqab while she was teaching. And therefore you found that it became one of the most controversial discussions within British politics as to whether a Muslim woman should have the right within society to cover her face, and whether it was seen as something obligatory or seen as something recommended. That's why you find that it's an issue which requires an examination and requires more dialogue between Muslims themselves and outside the religion of Islam. You find the Archbishop of Canterbury, Dr. Rowan Williams, himself coming forward and stating that there is a need of dialogue between Christians and Muslims on many different aspects of their beliefs, and especially on the aspect of the belief of the veil, that he wanted the people to understand what is the background to the veil in general and the niqab in particular. Is the niqab part of the religion of Islam, or is the niqab something which is cultural? Because when you travel in Muslim worlds today, you find that there are certain Muslim countries who state that the niqab is obligatory. And when you walk around in the streets, you notice that there are many women who are veiling their faces. Then there are other Muslim countries in the world who do not even wear the niqab at all. So for example, if you were to go to Saudi Arabia, you'd find that there are many women who have veiled their faces. If you were to go, for example, towards Afghanistan, there are certain areas where women would veil their faces. If you go to Pakistan, there are areas where women would veil their faces. But then you may go to a country like Tunisia or a country like Turkey and not find any veiling whatsoever. To the non-Muslim, this brings about confusion, as that on one hand you find a non-Muslim stating that is this veil obligatory or not. In some of your countries we find women who have to wear the veil. In other countries we find women who are told, no, you don't have to wear the veil of the face. Therefore they ask the question, is the veil of the face, the niqab, or in other terminologies, the burqa, is this veil something part of the religion of Islam, or is it something which is merely seen as being cultural but got inherited into Islamic tradition? Because Mutahhari was of the opinion that the niqab is an act which is cultural, which originally was cultural and then brought into Islamic tradition, and therefore you find that there seems to be a confusion which we need to address. And that's why tonight's examination looks at the controversy surrounding the niqab. I'd like to examine this in a number of stages. Number one, does religion aim to oppress women, or does religion aim to free the female? Number two, what are the arguments for the niqab and which verses are used? Number three, what are the arguments against the niqab? Number four, is the veil of a woman in Islam only physical, or is there a social veil as well? Number five, what was the scarf or the veil of the daughters of Ahl al-Bayt at Karbala, and how did this veil affect Hur bin Yazid al-Riyahi? Let us examine this, and we would have examined the topic in depth. Many come forward today in the media and stress that the religion of Islam is a religion which oppresses women, and that all the religions you see in the world today are religions which seek to oppress the female. This is normally based on a number of media depictions or articles or videos which highlight the religion of Islam as being a religion which has no other role but being one which suppresses the emotions of the female, and that all religions in general do not provide any freedom for the female whatsoever. You find, for example, if you were to look on YouTube, you'll find a video like the video known as Submission. That video is a video where you find that there are certain verses in the Holy Quran which are narrated, which are seen as verses which oppress the woman. That video surrounds YouTube. You find many hits coming from around the world who automatically gain the impression that the religion of Islam is a religion which oppresses women. You find, for example, Fadia Faqir wrote an article in the Guardian newspaper about how the hijab was an oppression towards her, and how now she has been freed by not having to wear the hijab. You find other depictions in the media which come forward and state that, look at religion. Religion is that hindrance which affects the progress of the female. We do not deny that there have been religious figures in history who have oppressed women. That there is no doubt. But don't necessarily judge the religion by its followers. There have been certain leaders in history who, without a shadow of doubt, have oppressed women. I remember Harun al-Rashid. Harun al-Rashid, the main family he used to respect when he was Khalifa of the Islamic State was the Barmaki family. Ja'far Barmaki, Yahya Barmaki, they were amongst the main ministers of Harun al-Rashid's government. These two ministers in Harun al-Rashid's government were looked after, that they used to have the best of rooms in the palaces of Baghdad. Their mother Ubaidah used to have a room that outside this room on the day of Eid there were 400 female slaves ready to serve her. How many? 400 female slaves outside their mother's room. On the day of Eid their role was to serve her. This is definitely an oppression of the female. If one were to look at it from the outside, some would come forward and say, look at Islam, it's a religion which oppresses the woman. Here is Harun al-Rashid, Khalifa of the Islamic State, who looks after the mother of his best friends by making 400 women serve her. We do not deny that yes, religion can be used as a tool to oppress women. That there is no doubt. That if you use religion in the wrong way, you can oppress anybody. But if you are to say that religion oppresses women, then logically speaking, we must argue that secular society frees women. If we were to use this, we have to bring about the argument that you are saying religion oppresses women. Okay, does that mean that secular society frees women? Not at all. If you were to look at many secular societies in the world today, and in history, you'll find that they haven't freed the female. On the contrary, they are more oppressive to the female sometimes than the religious societies. For example, in the Chinese Empire. The Chinese Empire was seen as a secular empire. There was no God-given religious backdrop to the empire. In the Chinese Empire, the narrations say to us that if a woman committed adultery in the Chinese Empire, then that woman, what would happen to her? The man would be given a fine, the woman would be killed by the animals of the empire. They would order an elephant to crush the body of that woman. That's a secular society. The man commits adultery, he gets away with a fine. Whereas when the woman commits adultery, she used to be killed by the animals. You find, for example, the Roman Empire. The Roman Empire, if a woman committed adultery with a slave, the slave was to be burnt and the woman was to be killed. These are all secular societies. Yet have they freed the woman? You find, for example, in pre-Islamic Arabia, before the Holy Prophet announced his religion, pre-Islamic Arabia was a secular society. Yet you still found, although it was a secular society, it would still oppress the woman. Brothels were a norm. In pre-Islamic Arabia, brothels were a norm. You would find the chief of the hypocrites, Abdullah ibn Ubay, owning a brothel which he used to call his house, with 6 women performing illegitimate actions within that house. Hence the Quran in chapter 24, verse 33 would state, وَلَا تُكْرِهُ فَتَيَاتِكُمْ عَلَى الْبِغَاءِ إِنْ أَرَدْنَ تَحَصُّنًا. Do not compel your female slave girls into this illicit action when they want to improve. Arabia was a secular society, yet did it free the female? No, it didn't. You find likewise in Arabia the female was buried alive. You find likewise in Arabia the female was inherited. She wouldn't receive an inheritance. When a person comes forward and says religion oppresses woman, we reply by saying, if secular society is meant to free woman, then have a look at secular society and what it done to woman. Likewise, when Sarkozy says that the veil is a sign of enslavement and subservience, we look at Sarkozy's secular France and look at the position of woman. You may enter a bar in France and see as many nude women as you want. And you can stay there and watch them dancing in front of you. Is that secular society freeing a woman? In that Champs-Élysées in Paris, you can walk, and on top of you, you'll see a billboard. And on that billboard, you'll see a woman, and next to that woman, you'll see a car. The woman isn't wearing anything. Is the advertising for the car or the body of the woman? Secular society, if it's meant to come and free the woman, then surely the woman wouldn't be depicted like the car. The car has no soul, and a woman has no soul as well. If your society is meant to be a society which frees the woman, then surely you wouldn't depict the woman in your shampoo adverts wearing absolutely nothing, and then there is a side note, this shampoo is good for you. You find in many cases that secular society doesn't free the woman. That's why there is a philosophical discussion. Is religion a means in Islam, or is it an end? This is a very important discussion. Why? Because when people ask you, does religion oppress women? We reply by stating that it's a paradoxical question. Why? Because religion's role is to come and free the human being and to guide them alongside their innate natural creation. When in philosophy people ask the question, is religion a means in Islam or is it an end? We reply, religion is a means. The ends is the intellectual evolution of the human being. Religion is that means which allows the human being to intellectually evolve. Religion isn't the end. No, religion is that means which God has given you, mankind, to intellectually evolve, to develop physically, to develop spiritually, to reach those highest levels which your creation can reach. That's why religion, its role is to protect the honor of the human being, the property of the human being, the intellect of the human, the life of the human, and the religion of the human. When someone comes and says religion oppresses, no, that's a contradiction. Religion's role is to free the human being and to allow them to develop themselves both physically and spiritually. That's why when the question arises about the niqab, some came and said that religion oppresses the woman through the niqab. There is a group of people who said no, the niqab isn't an oppression, and that the niqab is a legitimate form of dress within Islamic thought. You pose the question, why do you say this? On what basis? They say the Quran. So what do you mean the Quran? They say the Quran is that which tells us that it's obligatory for women to cover their faces. That the hijab of the woman is that her face must be covered. So you tell them which verse? They say there are 2 verses in the Quran which clearly prove that every Muslim woman must cover her face. Which ones? The first one, Surah 33, verse number 53. وَإِذَا سَأَلْتُمُوهُنَّ مَتَاعًا فَاسْأَلُوهُنَّ مِنْ وَرَاءِ حِجَابٍ. This verse states, if you are going to ask the woman for something, ask them from behind a veil. When was this verse revealed? This verse was revealed in Medina. The Holy Prophet, peace be upon him and his family, he used to sit with his wives. When he would sit with his wives, it would be normal that his companions used to come and visit him. His companions would come, they'd visit him, and on many occasions when they'd come to visit him, they wouldn't ask for permission when they'd enter. They'd enter the house and they'd leave as they deemed fit. The narration states to us that this became awkward for the Holy Prophet. That these people are entering my house, my wives are sitting in the room with me. These people are entering my house without asking any permission. They sit there, they eat with me, and having finished eating, they still don't leave. They remain sitting down. As I'm sure a number of you have invited people to your house where you've thought, okay, you've ate now, can you leave the house? I said, what else do you want to do in my house? Yet you find the Holy Prophet would be sitting down, his wives would be alongside him, these companions would sit. Rasulullah would find it difficult to tell them leave, because it's not in his akhlaq to tell someone to leave. He has come to perfect the morals of mankind. He felt it was awkward, not only that they were sitting, but it was awkward for him to tell them to leave. Because that type of gathering, you may be sitting with your wife, but when there are strangers who are sitting in that company, it becomes a bit awkward for you. That's why in Islam, mixed gatherings are not recommended. Why? Because even if your wife is covering herself, still the human being, sometimes his thoughts deceive him. And sometimes you may have certain feelings in a mixed gathering, which aren't feelings which are fit of a human being deemed worthy of respect. The Prophet was feeling awkward. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala revealed the verse that when you companions want to sit with Rasulullah and you want to ask something from his wives, ask for it from behind a veil. This, some people came forward and said, is a proof that all women should cover their faces. Why? Because they said the Quran clearly says that when you want to ask something from the wives of the Prophet, then you have to ask from behind the veil. You can't sit with them and look at them face to face. The reply that came in relation to this verse was what? The reply that came from the scholars was, yes, that applies to the wives of Rasulullah, but not necessarily every other woman in Arabian society or in Islamic society. Why? Because the wives of the Holy Prophet are not like any other wives. The wives of the Holy Prophet, like the wife of any revered personality, are expected to be the people of principles, the people of chastity, the people of modesty. The Quran tells the Holy Prophet's wives, Ya nisa an-nabi lastunna ka'ahadin min an-nisa. O wives of the Prophet, you are not like any other wives. Telling them that you, when you are the wife of the Prophet of God, people look at your actions and they judge Rasulullah. Any respected personality. His wife, people will look at the wife and say, look at the way she is behaving, he must be like that as well. If they are behaving in a manner of respect, then automatically the people will say, then the man is a man of respect. If they are behaving in a manner of disrespect, automatically people will begin to question the man himself. When the Quran said, ask behind the veil, when you speak to the wives of Rasulullah, it's because the Quran was saying, these wives are not like any other wives. These wives, we expect the highest level of morals from them. That's why in Surah 33 verse 30, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala clearly said that, O wives of the Prophet, if any of you one day come out with a public piece of indecency, we'll punish you double the punishment. Why? Because we've brought you up in the house of revelation. We've brought you up next to the greatest of moral exemplars. Do not come out one day with a public piece of indecency where the people look at your behavior and begin to question Rasulullah's principles. And that's why the negative point on Aisha, the wife of Rasulullah, was of course her stand against Ali ibn Abi Talib at the Battle of Jamal. Why? Because the Quran had clearly said, وَقَرْنَ فِي بُيُوتِكُنَّ, remain in your houses, وَلَا تَبَرَّجْنَ تَبَرُّجَ الْجَاهِلِيَّ الْأُولَى, and do not display your finer garments like you did in the days of ignorance. when she came out to fight Amir al-Mu'mineen, people began to ask, hold on, the verse had revealed if you want to speak to the wives of Rasulullah, you speak to them from behind the veil. Now the wife of Rasulullah is leading thousands of people who are not mahram to her in a war. How does this work? As in, the people expected much more decency, that you are the lady who was around Rasulullah. You saw the morals of this man. You saw what this man used to say about Ali ibn Abi Talib. Yet you still have it within you to come out and raise an army. Yes, people like Talha and Zubair didn't speak to her face to face because she was in a carriage on the camel, so they would speak to her from behind the veil. When the Quran said speak to the woman from behind the veil, the reply back to those who said the niqab is obligatory because of this verse was, no, this verse is addressing the wives of Rasulullah. That the wives of Rasulullah, because they are in such a level of religious reverence, then these wives of Rasulullah, when you speak to them from behind a veil. There was a second argument they posed. What was it? They said, okay, if you're saying that it's only the wives of the Prophet, then we'll reply to you with another verse. Surah 33, verse 59. يا أيها النبي قل لأزواجك وبناتك ونساء المؤمنين يدنين عليهن من جلابيبهن ذلك أدنى أن يعرفن فلا يؤذين. What does the verse say? The verse said, O Prophet of God, tell your wives and your daughters and the believing woman to do what? To make sure they wear a jilbab as a covering. That is better for them, so they are not hurt. Those proponents of niqab came forward and said what? They came forward and they said very clearly that, look, the verse says not just the wives. O Prophet of God, tell your wives and your daughters and the believing woman to wear a jilbab. Abu al-A'la al-Mawdudi said that a jilbab is that a woman must cover her face and cover her hands. And therefore many came forward and said that, you see, the Quran is clearly stating that a woman has to be one who covers her face. Why was this verse revealed? Because the slave girls in Arabia didn't need to wear hijab from their masters. When they were living in Medina, they didn't need to wear hijab from their masters. Their hijab was quite lax, to tell you the truth. You know, sometimes you have women who wear hijab where a bit of the hair is flicking out at the front. Their hijab was quite lax. These slave girls, their hijab was lax. The Muslim woman living in Arabia at the time, when they'd walk in the streets, sometimes the hypocrites of Medina, what would they do? They'd walk up to the Muslim woman and they'd pull the scarf off them, and when they would be reprimanded, they'd say, sorry, we thought she was a slave girl. When this used to happen, the Quran revealed this verse. O Prophet of God, tell your woman now that instead of just wearing a normal covering, let them wear another covering on top of that covering. Because you know, today in the streets, if you were to see two girls who are veiled, one is wearing a tight veil, tight top, tight jeans, and the other one is wearing a veil but with a cover outside her top and jeans. Which one would you show more respect for? In many cases, the one who's wearing a really tight top, really tight jeans, and really tight veil, you'll look at her straight away and you'll say, the hijab doesn't deem much respect. The one who's wearing a jilbab, an outer covering, see what the jilbab was meaning? An outer covering, that one was to be deemed worthy of more respect. The Quran told the Prophet, you should now order your woman not just to veil their hair and to wear clothing. No, they should wear an outer clothing so that the hypocrites of Medina do not make the excuse that we thought they are like the slave girls. And therefore you found that this reply was what? The reply to these people was that yes, you are right. The jilbab had to be worn as an outer covering, but not necessarily a covering on their faces. Why? Because al-Mawdudi said the biggest proof that there is that the woman in Arabia used to cover their faces with a niqab was that he said when Aisha used to say, whenever we'd go and pray Fajr behind our holy Prophet, when he would be leading Salat al-Fajr, on our way back the woman would not be recognized. Mawdudi said that this is evidence that the niqab is wajib. Why? Because he said, look, the fact that Aisha is saying women would not be recognized means that they were covering their faces. Our reply is, if you went to pray Salat al-Fajr behind Rasulullah at awwal time, and you left the Salah to go back home, it would still be dark outside, wouldn't it? So when people don't recognize you, it's not because you're wearing a niqab, it's because still darkness in the streets. And therefore you find that the school of Ahl al-Bayt would reply by stating that the niqab of the faces is not obligatory. In which way? In that they show that there are certain proofs that Rasulullah did not order for women to cover their faces. What are these proofs? The first proof that the Prophet didn't order was the proof of when the verse was revealed. Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. قُلْ لِلْمُؤْمِنِينَ يَغُضُّ مِنْ أَبْصَارِهِمْ وَيَحْفَظُ فُرُوجَهُم. The verse was revealed in the Quran in Surah 24 verse 30. Tell the believing men to lower their gaze and to protect their private parts. Why was this verse revealed? The Holy Prophet was sitting with Al-Fadl ibn Abbas. A woman came to ask the Prophet a question. When the Prophet was answering, he noticed the woman was looking at Al-Fadl and Al-Fadl was looking at the woman. The Holy Prophet at this moment, when he noticed the both of them staring at each other and giving each other glances, he went like this to Fadl. You know, sometimes when our parents tell us when something comes on television, don't watch, and we go like this. We're watching, but we try and pretend we're hiding. The Holy Prophet at this moment, he moved Al-Fadl. He said to Al-Fadl, do not look in this way. The Quran revealed the verse, tell the believing men to lower from their gaze. Notice the Quran didn't say, and the woman to do what? And tell the believing woman to make sure their faces are covered. Notice that had this lady, for example, done something wrong by not covering her face, the Holy Prophet should have said to her there and then that Al-Fadl, don't look at women in this way, and you, oh lady, why haven't you covered your face? Because clearly the fact that Al-Fadl is giving her glances means Al-Fadl can definitely see her face. As in, why would you give glances to a black piece of cloth? You wouldn't give glances to a black piece of cloth. Somebody will look at you and think, what's wrong with this person giving glances to a black piece of cloth? Clearly Al-Fadl was looking at the face. The Holy Prophet, the fact that he didn't tell her, it is obligatory for you to go and cover your face, highlights that the Prophet had no problem with women who were showing their faces. That's number one. Number two, we have two hadiths in our books in the school of Ahl al-Bayt, which highlights that Fatima, daughter of the Prophet, her face on certain occasions could be seen and her hands could be seen. Because we know Surah 24 verse 31 says, tell the believing woman to lower from their gaze, to protect their private parts, and to cover everything except that which is made apparent. That which is made apparent, what is it? It's our hands and our faces. That a woman, her hands can be shown and her face can be shown on the basis of a narration relating to Fatima al-Zahra. Which narration? The first narration from Salman al-Muhammadi. Salman narrates that I went with the Holy Prophet to the house of Fatima. When we went to her house, we entered upon the house. The Prophet, as usual, would send his greetings to the house of Ahlul Bayt, the house of his family. He said, when I entered, I saw Fatima's hands bleeding, because she had been grinding the wheat so much that her hands were bleeding. Here is the first proof of the idea that in hijab a woman can show her hands. But then what's the proof that a woman can show her face in Islam, in her hijab, and doesn't have to wear a niqab? The proof can be seen where? Jabir bin Abdullah al-Ansari. He narrates that we went to visit whom? We went to visit the Holy Prophet. Or we went to visit Fatima. When we went to visit, the Prophet gave his normal greeting. Assalamu alaikum ya ahla bayt al-nubuwah. He would send his salams to the family. And then he would enter. He said, I saw Fatima's face pale from the amount of work that she had done. And he said, I thought to myself, look at this man, Muhammad, he is the leader of the state, yet look at the humility of his family. That he has a daughter like Fatima, not complaining about her duties. This hadith narrated in Al-Kafi and in the Wasail indicates to us that in the school of Ahlul Bayt, even Fatima al-Zahra, there would be an occasion where her face would be exposed, not necessarily to anyone, no. Because Jabir bin Abdullah al-Ansari is one of the closest companions of Al-Muhammad. He is the one who the Prophet said, you will meet Al-Baqir, send my salams to him. But that he mentions himself, that I saw the face of Fatima al-Zahra clearly in front of me. Here, what is the point? The point is that within the school of Ahlul Bayt, jurisprudentially, the hair is to be veiled. The bosom area and the chest is to be veiled. There is to be a jilbab, an outer covering on top of your normal clothing. But that the face and the hands, it is not obligatory for you to veil them. There may be conditions which are stipulated by the scholars, where there may be instances where they give a secondary opinion. But on the whole, in the school of Ahlul Bayt, the jilbab is not obligatory. The jilbab in terms of the veiling of the face and the niqab and the burqa, that is not seen as being obligatory. And that's why the question arises, in the school of Ahlul Bayt, is the most important hijab the physical hijab? No. The hijab is not just simply a physical hijab. You have a hijab which is a physical hijab, and a hijab which is a social hijab, and a hijab which is a spiritual hijab. Notice that in the physical hijab, for example, you may get somebody who is wearing the best of physical hijabs. Go to Dubai, for example. Go to Kuwait, for example. Go to Qatar, for example. You will see women who are wearing the best of physical hijabs. Yet sometimes your eyes can do more talking than anything else. That she may be covered from head to toe, yet her eyes are wandering one way and the other. The makeup is completely covering the eyes. If you were to go and see the statistics of illegitimate adulterous relationships that exist in Middle Eastern Muslim communities, where there are daughters of Islam who have to go for surgical operations to make sure that when they get married, their husband thinks that they are as pure as the way their mothers brought them into this world. Why? Because to these women, hijab was just physical. As long as I'm wearing a covering which is physical, nobody's going to really get in my way. I'll cover so that the community doesn't see me as having a bad reputation. Yet I do not have any social hijab whatsoever. The religion of Islam came forward and said what? If the hijab was only physical, then the hijab would be something extremely basic. For any woman can cover herself with the physical. Yet what do we find? The school of Ahlul Bayt came forward and said the hijab is social as well as physical. Social meaning what? There's no point covering yourself from head to toe if your manners are the worst of manners. You may get somebody, for example, who has covered themselves from head to toe, but is a walking arrogance machine when they enter a mosque. In which way? When they enter a mosque, they are wearing a hijab. They look around. That section is the upper class section. That's my section. That section over there, they're the lower class. I don't sit with people like that. That section, they're from my city and back home. Whereas that section, they are from a much more backward city. You find that that person may be wearing hijab head to toe. Physically, they have mastered the hijab. But the hijab wasn't just physical. The hijab was social as well. That there were morals next to that hijab. That when the hijab was established, your akhlaq was more important than any physical covering. That you may find somebody now in the community who physically are wearing the most beautiful hijab, yet have no humility whatsoever, hardly congratulate you on an auspicious occasion, do not ask about your health, do not ask about your wealth, do not ask about the progress of your children. They are wearing the best of physical hijab, but their social hijab leaves a lot to be desired. That you find especially in many of the new reverts in our communities. When their wives come to the mosque, these ladies who have sacrificed so much to come to the community, that in many cases they are more knowledgeable than 90% of our community, because they had to read, whereas we were born into it. You find when their ladies come into the mosque, instead of the ladies of the community coming up to that new sister of theirs in the mosque and saying, how is it that we can help you? Welcome to our community. How are your children? Do you want to join in our activities? You find that some of them complain they have not been spoken to from the day they walked into the mosque. And that is something which we should be ashamed of. Why? Because the moment you enter the school of Ahlul Bayt, you are entering the banner of Fatima and the daughters of Fatima. And as soon as you enter that banner, you are like everybody else, and on the contrary, you deserve more respect. Because whereas we were born into the school, these people have had to make a long journey to the school. That's the first social hijab. The second is the social hijab of the cyber world. Because when you look at Facebook today, the hijab is deteriorating day by day. Physically, the hijab is brilliant. Because when our daughters on Facebook come to the community, their hijab is brilliant. Why? Because you have to maintain respect in the community. In the community, you have to make sure the respect is there. At the end of the day, grandma sitting in the corner, she's been looking at me for years. I have to make sure she looks at me as a girl who one day is somebody who she will smile with and respect with and may even bring into her family. You may find certain daughters who when they come to the mosque, their hijab is brilliant. Go and look at the Facebook account and see the social hijab. When you go to that cyber world and the Facebook accounts today, it is an obligatory duty on the mothers of the children of School of Ahlul Bayt to ask their daughters, show me your account. Because if you've got nothing to hide, you won't have a problem. You'll say, Mom, if you want to look at my account, you're more than welcome. Unless, of course, you've added on about 200 male friends, and you're poking every Tom, Dick and Harry, and you're sending hearts to every John, Steve and Nikki, and you're moving one way and the other. You're posing, one's got a finger in her mouth, the other's winking at the screen, the other one has got her lips coming out in the most luscious way, like they've been in a surgery in Beverly Hills somewhere. You'll find, for example, that there are images on the Facebook accounts today of girls who claim to follow the school of Ahlul Bayt. Yet on their Facebook accounts, you find conversations which leave a lot to be desired. And then what do? They go and put it on privacy settings. Privacy from Allah or from the community. Because today there are some who fear their community more than Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. They'll fear their community. Why? Because I can't let my community know that I was sitting in a gathering like this, where 3 to my right are people I do not know and 3 to my left are males from my community. I can't let the community know, therefore I'll put it on privacy settings. Believe me or you don't believe me, privacy settings, however much you think you have privacy, you don't. Because this isn't a world of privacy. This is a world where you can't trust anybody. Your best friend who you think will never give away your account will tell her friends, come and look at her pictures. And unfortunately, because of that, you see the hijab deteriorating. Why? Because if the hijab was only physical, I'd say to you, don't worry about the Facebook world. But the hijab is social as well. You have a reputation to keep. There's going to be a day you're going to be part of the mothers of this community. Napoleon used to say, give me good mothers and I'll give you a strong nation. Whereas if the mothers today, who are going to be the mothers of the future, if their Facebook accounts have got certain conversations, or they are members of certain fan clubs, or they have got musical tunes on their accounts, recommending their friends to listen to those tunes, then you'll find that the social hijab is deteriorating day by day. Someone will come and say to me, Ammar, you're being a bit harsh on Facebook. I'm not being harsh. All I say is that a knife can cut oranges or it can kill a human being. A knife can cut oranges or it can kill a human being. Facebook can advertise an event like no other event. Can advertise a program like no other program. But Facebook can also destroy your reputation. And however much you think you'll win it back, you will not win it back. Unfortunately today in the School of Ahlul Bayt, our daughters on their Facebook accounts fear the community, but do not fear the Lord that built that community. They fear human beings who go to sleep and do not fear that Lord who is always awake. Have a sense of social responsibility. That's the second hijab. The third hijab in the School of Ahlul Bayt, the spiritual hijab of a vision in the world of a female. What's that hijab? That's the hijab where you as a female ask yourself, okay, physically I have covered myself completely. Socially, I have looked after my reputation. Spiritually, what's my role in the Ja'fari school? Is my role to translate the works of Sheikh al-Mufid, or the works of Sheikh al-Tusi, or the works of Sheikh al-Kulaini, or the works of Sheikh al-Saduq? Is my role to ensure that the works of scholars like Allama Tabatabai and Sayyid al-Khumaini and Sayyid Muhammad Baqir al-Sadr are given out to the west as well as to the east? Is my role to write articles on Mother's Day about Imam Ali's view on the mother? Is my role on Father's Day to write an article about Rasulullah's hadith about the father? Is my role to translate Risalat al-Huquq of Imam Zain al-Abidin so that the whole world can read the thoughts of Imam Zain al-Abidin? Is my role to translate al-Sahif al-Sajjadiyya in a world where people want spirituality, where some are going to Kabbalah, others are going to Buddhism, others are going to Scientology? Zain al-Abidin has looked at spirituality years before any human being. That third hijab is a spiritual hijab. Whereas a female, you recognize your role within the school that you represent. You recognize that this hijab is a means for my perfection, not an end. That I'll use this hijab to build the school, to reform the heritage of the school, to reform the teachings of the school. That I will become like Fatima when she stood up in the speech of Fadak, or like Zainab when she stood up in Sham. You find that the third hijab is one which we are missing. We have many daughters today who are doing a brilliant job physical hijab. Many who are doing an excellent job with their social hijab. Yet we are lacking in the spiritual visionary hijab. The veil where a human being removes the veils of this world and seeks to build the veil of the hereafter. A person who when they live amongst you, you crave their company, but when they die, you weep over them. And that's why you find with the daughters of Rasulullah, you find that their hijab was a means to their perfection. That Fatima, daughter of Muhammad, didn't just concentrate on her physical hijab. No, she had a social responsibility to speak out against injustice. And when she saw injustice with the land of Fadak, she spoke out against it straight away. Likewise, you find that all her daughters and the daughters of Ahlul Bayt maintained their hijab in every way. One asks the question, what was the hijab of Al-Muhammad publicly? The hijab of Al-Muhammad publicly was that they'd cover their hair and their whole body and their face as well. What's the proof? The proof is when Sayyida Zainab was taken to the court of Yazid. And she said to him, "Oh Yazid, is it fair that you disgrace us and you unveil our faces so that all can see us, from the stranger to the acquaintance, from the noble to the ignoble, while there is none there to defend us?" People ask the question on the 10th of Muharram, when the daughters of Rasulullah were running from tent to tent, who was there to come and protect them? And people also ask the question, what happened to their hijab? Their hijab of the face was snatched off them. That Zainab, who in Kufa, some scholars would say, we didn't even know the shadow of her body when she'd walk in the street. We wouldn't even know when she used to walk in the street if that is Zainab, or if that is Kulthum, or if that is from the other daughters of Ahlul Bayt. The scholars would state that on the 10th of Muharram, Umar ibn Sa'ad ordered his soldiers to do what? To attack the veils of the daughters of Rasulullah. And this in particular had an effect on Hur bin Yazid al-Riyahi. Why? Because Hur bin Yazid al-Riyahi had the sincerity within him that helped him change on the night of the 10th of Muharram. In which way? Hur bin Yazid al-Riyahi was a man of respect. Do you know when he got to Karbala and Imam al-Hussein got to Karbala, the first thing he did, he came to Aba Abdullah. He said to him, "Ya Aba Abdullah, my soldiers are thirsty and my horses are thirsty. Do you mind giving us some water?" Aba Abdullah, like his father Amir al-Mu'minin at Saffin, Aba Abdullah said, "Oh Hur, if your soldiers and your horses are thirsty, I will provide you with the water." He said, "Thank you, O son of Fatima al-Zahra." When he wanted to pray his salah, one of his companions said that, "Hur, you lead." He said, "How can I lead when the son of Fatima al-Zahra is in front of me?" All of these words surprise people, that you have come to block Aba Abdullah, yet you have that type of respect for him. Aba Abdullah, when he finished his salah, he was about to leave to go towards Kufa. Hur said to him, where are you going? He said, I'm going towards the land of Kufa. He said to him, why? He said, because there are signatories of people who are waiting for me. Hur said, I'm sorry, I cannot let you go. He said to him, what do you mean? He said, I do not know about any of these signatories. My role here was simply to get you to pledge the allegiance, Ya Aba Abdullah, then you can go. He said to him, may your mother weep over you. At that moment, Hur looked at him and he said to him, if you had been the son of any other mother, I would have attacked your mother. But your mother is one deserving of the greatest respect, for you are the son of Fatima al-Zahra. That whole week after that day, Hur was in a state of confusion, that I'm the one who has to block the water from Aba Abdullah al-Hussein. He's the one who blocked them from reaching that water. It remained with him until the night of the 10th of Muharram. When he looked at the tent across, he was with Umar ibn Sa'ad, with Shimr ibn Dil-Jawshan, and with Ibn Ziyad, and he looked at the tent across. He saw the daughters and the granddaughters of Fatima al-Zahra. He had known that Sayyida Zainab all his life when he was in Kufa and she was in Kufa. Not one person had known who Sayyida Zainab and what she looked like. He had known in Kufa, when Sayyida Zainab would give a majlis, she would even cover her face from the ladies so that the ladies would not tell their husbands how she looked like. And now he sees the daughter of Fatima al-Zahra moving from tent to tent, holding orphans who are shouting out, Al-Atash, Al-Atash, Al-Atash. The thirst is killing us, the thirst is killing us, the thirst is killing us. Hur bin Yazid al-Riyahi looked one way and he looked another. He looked at his son Ali, he looked at that moment at his brother Mus'ab, and he looked at his servant. There were three incidents which made him leave the army of Umar ibn Sa'ad. The first of them, he asked Umar ibn Sa'ad, what's going to happen tomorrow? Umar ibn Sa'ad said, tomorrow will be a day when the heads will be severed and the hands will be flying. Hur put his head down. The next incident, he looked at Shimr bin Dil-Jawshan. Imam al-Hussein had come, he had put forward fire in front of the tent so that the people could not attack his tent. Shimr looked at Imam al-Hussein and he said to him, Hussein, you light this fire, but are you ready for the fire of the day of judgment? Hur put his head down. But the third incident is the one that got to him. What was it? It was the incident when he saw Umar ibn Sa'ad on the morning of the 10th of Muharram complaining about what? Umar bin Sa'ad was complaining that the hooves of his horses could not take the heat of Karbala. Hur looked at himself and he said to himself, if the hooves of the horses of Umar bin Sa'ad cannot take the heat of Karbala, then how is the daughter of Fatima al-Zahra taking this heat, and how are the granddaughters taking them? He looked at himself and he looked at his son and then he looked at his brother. He looked at his servant and he said to his servant, is my horse ready? He said to him, yes, the horse is ready. Muhajir narrates that I came to Hur. I said, Hur, if someone was to ask me who is the greatest soldier in the whole of Kufa, I would say it's you. But you look very scared. What's wrong? He said to him, I have to make a decision between heaven and hell. And then I have to make a decision between this world and the hereafter. But my decision is to go towards Aba Abdullah. He rode on his horse, he came towards Aba Abdullah. When he came towards him, he asked his servant, I want you to cover my face. The servant looked at him and he said to him, why? He replied back to him by saying, I am ashamed to show my face to Aba Abdullah. What do I say to the daughter of to the son of Fatima al-Zahra? He came near him. When he came near him, Abu Fadl al-Abbas came out. Abu Abdullah said to Abu Fadl, oh Abu Fadl, return back to me. Hur came near Abu Abdullah. It's as if he said to him, Ya Abu Abdullah, forgive me for blocking the water from reaching you. Abu Abdullah, I didn't know that they wanted to execute you. Abu Abdullah, had I known that they wanted to have the daughters of
Abdullah said to him, Hur, do not worry, I forgive you. You are now on our side. He said to him, come down from your horse. Hur looked at him and he said, Ya Aba Abdullah, I ask you for one thing. He said, what is it? He said to him, Ya Aba Abdullah, allow me to go out and defend you first, for I am the one who made them attack you. Hur came out, he sent his son Ali first. Ali got killed. Hur came out, he attacked the opposition forces one by one. None of them could attack him until Umar bin Sa'ad came out and he said, do not fight him one-on-one. Do you not know he is of the commanders of Kufa? I want you to attack him from every angle. And they attacked him from every angle. When they attacked him, he fell on the ground and he called out, Assalamu alayka ya Aba Abdullah. When he called this out, Abu Abdullah came running towards him. He sat by him. When he sat by him, he said to him, Hur, you are like your mother named you, free in this world and free in the hereafter.
Inna lillah wa inna ilayhi raji'un. We pray to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to raise us with Muhammad and Al Muhammad, to allow us to be amongst those who follow their message and continue in their path. Raise us with the Imam of your time, Imam Sahib al-Asr wal-Zaman. Allow us to be amongst his companions. We pray to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala the Surah Al-Fatiha, but before it, the loudest of your salawat.